just this is our ramblings and musings, about this really bad movie.
This very strange one-off that we have come to
Yeah.
love so much.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I like to call right now back cover case by case, with your hosts Kou, Kagero, internet busybody, and the box.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about our obsession with Kingdom Hearts Union Cross back cover. It's a short video included on the 2.8 remix for what now? Do you remember?
Sorry for.
Oh, the video back cover was included in what?
Is in 2.8 for the PS4.
Yeah, I was a little reticent to get into it, but there's just something really arresting and interesting with the way the story, or the characters, I should say, are written. The story itself is anticlimactic because it ends on a cliffhanger. But I've noticed the more we look at the characters and how they interact with each other, and the premise of the story itself, the more there is to uncover. What do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely why I got interested in it. And for me, it was kind of weird because I had left the series for a very long time. Like, I didn't. I was really not, up to date with what was going on in Union Cross mostly. Like, I knew something about DDD, but for me it was like a surprise because I had like this friend of mine that kept telling me, there is a Kingdom Hearts movie, and I was like, what the hell, what the hell, when did this happen and why? And when I looked a little bit into it, I saw that all the characters were new, and so I was like, okay, maybe I can get into this. And didn't help that one of this friend in particular, but also another friend, they were saying, you are going to love one of the characters.
Oh.
Because they know me so well.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'm getting interested
Aha.
in this. And I think that's how I sold, the movie to you too. I was like, the characters are really good.
Yes. I remember, and there was also some really good fan art coming in from that. So it's like I kind of was enticed to come in, even though I wasn't quite ready to start another Kingdom Hearts story, because I kind of jumped out of the fandom as soon as we finished Kingdom Hearts 2, and that's not even the final mix. We finished it as it was released. Me and my husband is what I mean by we. We figured that was a good place to leave off on the story, and I kind of didn't pay attention at all to anything else that came out. But so years later, right on the edge of the release of 3, or maybe slightly after, I got into back cover, and yeah, I was a fool for not jumping in earlier, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's basically where we stand on this. And it became like this weird obsession for the both of us.
I mean, it's still ongoing.
Yeah, it's still ongoing. Like, we keep having like this really deep conversation about the characters and all the symbolism in the story. And so yeah. Something else that we have to point out is that this is where the lore really starts to become actual lore, in my opinion. While before it was just, an ongoing story with some little flashbacks sometimes, because even Birth by Sleep is like 10 years prior to the main, events of 1 and 2. So it's not 100 years before, it's not lore. It's just, 10 years ago when Sora was a little kid.
Yeah.
These other things were going on. And I remember actually that lots of people, when Birth by Sleep came out, they were like, okay, this is like hundreds and hundreds of years before.
All right.
and yeah, this is something that like most people thought, because it was presented like this sort of Keyblade wielding society, in a sense. Like, they had like the armor, there were the masters, and it's weird to think that it happened only 10 years before. And
it really makes you think about the events of Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, like, but I also think it helps
weird.
because like Sora and the Destiny trio, they're so young, they're not yet familiar with, and they're not even interested, I think, at this age with what came before, like, what their society is about and where it came from. So, like, of course they wouldn't
No,
pay any attention to
it
that.
makes
Yeah.
sense. It makes sense, and like from their perspective, at least in one, they had no idea that there was that there was another Keyblade before
right.
Soras.
I mean, some of the lore
Which makes perfect sense to me. And I don't know, that's probably why I think that back cover, and I keep saying this even like in the server, in other places, and to my friends, like I think that back cover and Key in general, the spin-off mobile game that is the big prequel, is like Birth by Sleep done right.
Oh, yeah?
Because to me, that's what they should have done. Like immediately after 2, they should have gone way before and do Union Cross.
Like we're doing right now.
That's what. But as an actual console game. But that's not what we got. So.
Right.
But now we have back cover, and we are going to pine over it.
Yes, we're going to overanalyze it. We're going to get overly attached to the characters and look too deep into things. So if you're looking for any fact-based, you, the audience, if you are looking for any fact-based, like, solid evidence on the theories and the questions you had in mind, you might not find it here. This is pretty much just us fangirling over this silly movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And there is also the fact that at this point in which we are recording this, many questions have not been answered yet. So actually, before we started recording, we were like, should we actually do this now, or should we wait for the next big update to drop? But we just decided, okay, let's do it, and then if something is revealed, we can just go back and see and say, we were wrong.
It'll be fun to come back and say, wow, we had no idea this was going on and we were wrong, or wow, we were almost there, but of course we couldn't know because Nomura is the one writing, not us. So it'll be fun to look back.
Yeah, so we're just doing this as a very relaxed chat between the two of
us. As relaxed and structured as we can do it without going too crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we have like an outline for this whole thing in order, not to have so many diversions, but there are going to be diversions. I think that we are already spending way too much time
on the intro. Yeah, it's almost
on the intro.
It's fine.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to go. About like how can I say, like the tropes and like the main topics that back cover has that, like, in my opinion, the series never had before.
Actually, you know what? I'm not too familiar with what they didn't have before because, like I said, I've only played games 1 and 2. But games 1 and 2, and just for some background, the box and I have come from the Bloodborne, Soulsborne fandom, which the story is not at all like told to you. You have to deduce the motivations of characters and what they're all about based off of the environment they're in and incidental item descriptions and the way they're placed in the environment. Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, I guess, benefits from the fact that the whole story is told to you. If the writers wanted you to know something, they would have put it right in front of you and explained why it's important to you. The most interesting thing to Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, to my knowledge, would have been the secret reports that came out.
They were like the more obscure part.
And you could
of the lore,
you could go through
while
the whole thing.
Everything else was just spelled out for you.
Yeah, and that's a benefit they had, which is also expected because, for example, the Soulsborne games are for a significantly older audience. It's a mature-rated game. Whereas Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts 2 and all the other titles that came out under that are for a significantly younger audience. So they had to, I mean, not that they had to, but they decided to tell the story as it should be told and not leave anything too much to speculation. So the fact of the matter is, when we come to back cover, you only get so much space to tell a story, especially a 3D animation, because that costs money. So you have to pack as much as you can into each scene. So the more you are familiar with story tropes, and especially since Nomura says everything has meaning now, any, like, even theology. I think somebody did a lore video on the colors that each of the foretellers have. Their accent colors might have significance.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that one.
And even like some of the plants that they have in this movie could be lore significant. And we'll touch on that, especially in Ira's case, because it's pertinent. But yeah, there's a lot of things now to dig into and look at and say, does that indicate that this, represents this character and so forth and so forth? And you can get pretty like galaxy brain memed on this thing, but like we'll just casually go over these as it comes up.
Yeah, and again, we come from this other fandom in which basically theories and speculation are the meat of the fandom, because it's I wouldn't say that's 100% head canons, because like there are some events in the stories of the Soulsborne games that are set in stone, but everything else is just, I think that's how it went. That's the approach, and especially what we consider the how can I say, the healthy approach to the Soulsborne fandom is saying, yep, that's my opinion, that's my interpretation, but another interpretation of the story is equally valid, because we really don't know.
Yeah, and it's purposely
in this
left
case,
that way, so we could engage.
In this case, it's a bit different.
Yeah, only because it's just started. Like, there's maybe too much we could look into, but I mean, for now, we have certain preconceptions on what the writers might be trying to tell us, and so we will present it in the way we think it exists, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it invalidates anything else. Not at all.
Yay!
Yeah. So
okay, so let's actually move into the movie.
Well, let me first address. We're going to go over each character as their cases unfold. We're going to discuss their role, how they handle their roles, and then how the foretellers perceive each other and their handling of said roles, because this whole story is really interwoven with the way the characters interact with each other. And maybe as it goes on, my own thinking of the group will be in the terms of a teacher and his students that have possibly been with each other for several years at this case. And I pick several years because I really like the whole idea, the structure behind like how a knight is trained, where like at 7 you start going into your page training, and then you go to a squire, and then by the time you're like 21, you're finally a knight errant going out doing things in order to gain prestige. So my view of the Master of Master and his pupils, the foretellers, will be a group that has been with each other for at least 7 to 5 years. And it's kind of hard not to think of it that way when you see how, familiar they are with the way each other act. Well,
there is certain a level of familiarity, but at the same time there is this distance, because they are not actual family, they are colleagues basically, so they don't get that close or that familiar, but at the same time you can tell that they know each other. They have known each other for at least a while.
They kind of are familiar with each other's quirks. The story, for those who know, starts out actually with Luju's case, but we're going to save that for the end because Luju's case is split into 2 halves. One is just an introduction, and then in order to bind everything together, we learn of his role at the end. And then we'll also be including a 7th case reserved for the Master of Masters and how it ties everything together. The 7th case will be called, of course, a case of pride. And now we can actually get into the whole movie.
Finally, after how many minutes?
15, just about.
Almost 15 minutes of introduction is fine. But I think it's important also for whoever is listening to know where we are coming from, who we are, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, what we intend to do, what we don't intend to do.
This is, we are not going to do this intro for the other episodes.
Yeah, and it's actually highly recommended that you are familiar with the movie before jumping in with us, because we will not explain a lot of what happens in the movie scene by scene. In fact, we're going to jump straight to Case of IRA, which is the first kind of episode right after the narration ends.
Okay, good.
All right, cool. So,
Yes.
the case of IRA. After Chirithi, our narrator, sets up the world setting and the character's place in it, the case of IRA is every case is the Master of Masters and his apprentice, and the role that he's given his apprentice, and in this case, IRA. IRA is supposed to be the leader, the Boy Scout. He is, I guess, I would always characterize him as he's the Red Ranger of the group. The Master of Masters will or has foreseen that he may vanish or disappear, and Ira is supposed to lead them from there on. And it's at this point that we also get a breakdown of the world setting from the Master of Master, in that the world is, if you are familiar with Kingdom Hearts, this is important, the world is one, and it stretches out as far as the eye can see, and all of them share a great light, which is Kingdom Hearts. It's kind of framed in a good way, Kingdom Hearts at this point, and I'd like to leave it open to maybe it'll have a more sinister connotation later, but one of the interesting things that happens in this case is when the Master of Master tells Ira he's going to lead, he also mentions the Book of Prophecies that foretells a cataclysmic event that's about to happen. It will affect a lot of people, and Ira is immediately on the case with protecting Kingdom Hearts and the light that exists, but the Master immediately shoots him down for going this good guy route, because the Master of Master actually wants them to prepare for what comes after.
And there is like another thing that I always, kind of sticks out, to me, is that Ira directly says that, I don't remember the exact line, but basically he goes, you gave us,
Yeah.
he's talking to the Master, you gave us, these Keyblades so that we can spread the teachings of light.
Yeah.
Which to me is interesting because it implies that the Master has taught them the teachings of light.
Right.
And this is a funny little way in which I explained back cover to a friend that was not familiar with Kingdom Hearts, but was a huge Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, basically the situation in this movie is that, there are these 6 Jedi apprentices that are taught, since they were younglings, they were taught under this guy that apparently is teaching them the ways of the Force and, the light side of the Force, or at least that's what they believe. But the more, you go into this movie, the more sinister this character becomes, the Master. And so, like, my joke was, try to imagine, these 6 Jedi apprentices being trained by a Sith Lord that pretends to be a Jedi Master. That's how I explained,
and it's,
to...
Yeah.
Just a funny, parenthesis, but that's kind of how, the Master is framed here. Ira is like, you taught us, the good way, the light side of the thing. And the Master is like, yeah, but, that's not going to save the world, like you have to, so, yeah.
And what's funny about this scene is that so even if you've never seen Kingdom Hearts, so all the foretellers are dressed in a way that looks like they could be good guys. They have light-colored robes that are in various pastels of other shades so you can tell them apart. But the Master of Masters, the character we're almost immediately introduced to, is wearing just like from head to toe a black robe. If that doesn't like set off warning bells in your head, then maybe you're just holding out to hope that looks are deceiving. But anybody who's played Kingdom Hearts also knows that this particular outfit has only ever been used by people who cause nothing but trouble. I mean, they tend to be more on the antagonistic side of the storyline.
Let's say that other like good characters have used it, but when it was introduced, it was the villain's uniform.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened. Then, at some point, somehow even Mickey Mouse got one of the coats.
Yeah.
let's not talk
Let's
about
not
that.
talk about Michael Mouse.
Michael Mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
There
have
is like another thing about the clothes, since you mentioned it. There is this, at least something that's again I immediately noticed, and I thought it was really cool when I saw back cover for the first time. And it kinda is the same reasoning that I had when I looked at the outfits for the characters in BBS.
Yeah.
But it's more relevant, maybe not to the kids, in BBS, but more to Erakos and Xehanort, mostly Erakos, I would say.
Okay.
Is that they have like these clothes that look older, in an old style compared to like, especially Erakos' clothing is more like traditional Japanese.
That's also true.
Samurai kind of gear, and kimono, and Terra has the same thing, and now that we've seen Erakos and Xehanort as kids, they both were wearing that kind of gear.
Yeah.
And when you look at the foretellers, they definitely look more like, they would fit more in medieval kind of setting, like more European medieval setting. Like if you remove the masks, that are exotic in a way, they're weird, but the clothing is just looks like monk robes,
exactly.
in a way.
Really fancy monk robes.
And they are setting up, this whole situation in which these characters, they are in this sort of cult, or at least, it is set up as an order, like the Keyblade Order or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, this isn't just some like after-school program. All of them are invested in this.
And there is also this chain of there is like a hierarchy. So you have the Master of Masters, which by the way is an awesome title.
Yes.
If I can say
it even
that.
has a great acronym.
Then you have like these apprentices that are masters in their own right.
Yep, that's why.
And then there are these other apprentices that are basically the player characters in Union Cross. So your character is one of these key kids, if we want to call the average Keyblade wielder.
Yes.
And then you have, even under them, you have like the servants, which are the spirits and the Dream Eaters. So there is this pyramid in a way of power at play, which again is something that I personally would have liked to see in BBS. That wasn't there.
Right.
It was there, but not to this extent. Like, to me, this looks like they took the basic idea and they actually expanded on it.
So. It's possible now that he's had enough time to write it.
And so, back to Ira. Ira is completely dressed in white. So this is the first image that you see in his case. Yep. And even if the landscape, around it is very peaceful, there is the nice fields and the sea, you can see daybreak town from afar. And I think it's like probably daybreak.
Yes.
I don't know what time of the day it is,
early
but it
morning.
Looks like daybreak, like early morning.
The sun is just cresting over the mountains.
Yeah, and it's really pretty. Sorry, I hit the mic. I hope it doesn't make any weird sound, but so it's this really peaceful setting, and then you have the Master of Masters completely dressed in black.
Yeah, no, that's
saying,
not foreboding or anything.
Yeah, and saying the world is going to shit. It doesn't matter.
We're gonna plan for afterwards. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't sweat.
Yeah, so you can't really blame Ira, who's supposed to be the leader, when his master tells him, okay, look, there's going to be great suffering. Don't worry about it. We'll plan for after. And that's one of the more interesting things about Ira, especially when you compare it to a couple of the other foretellers, because he not only does he question the state of things to come, because any good person who is concerned for others would question why let the tragedy happen if we know it's going to come. He immediately steps up and says, well, we should avert it. Full stop. This is something that shouldn't happen. So he rejects his master's plan to let the war happen and prepare after, and instead he says, we are going to try and save everyone. To which point his master is just like, yeah, sure, okay, sounds good.
if you can try,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And it does seem a little flippant on the master's part, but maybe we'll discuss it later. But I guess we should mention there is a book of prophecies that tells the master everything that's going to happen. So he knows this is going to happen. He knows what's coming later, and this is probably why he's more concerned with preparing for the after, because he knows this has to happen. Ira doesn't, because he's still caught up in the now, and he's going to try avert it. But it seems suspicious to me that the Master of Master, or the Mom as we like to call him, will capitulate so easily. And it's one of the worrying things about the Master of Master, because it seems almost like he is setting up all of his apprentices, the foretellers, to help bring about the things that will transpire. He's kind of setting it, almost to me seems like he's setting them up to fail. And in this case, if you frame it in that set of mind, when the mom just says, okay, good luck, you kind of wonder, all right, did he want Ira to reject his initial idea? Is that why he brought up Kingdom Hearts and why there's a light protecting everyone? But I mean, that's just me being paranoid. I guess we'll see later on.
No, to me, it makes sense. It looks like, okay, I got the answer, the response that I wanted from Ira. I can move on. That's basically what I feel like the master was doing. Okay, I'm going to try to persuade him to do this. Oh, okay, he's already on the right track.
Good
okay,
boy.
I can move to the next. I can move to the next apprentice. I'm good.
Another interesting thing we should bring up is this story takes place in a lot of flashbacks and flash forwards, and sometimes we're given a time frame for when things happen. But in the case where each foreteller receives their role, we're not told how far back that happens, except there is one mention that their roles were received a year prior to the big events of the story. So we don't exactly know when or what order all of their roles were given, but we know...
We know that Lushu was the first.
Yeah.
It says at some point, I have like notes. This for the case of Lushu, but I'm bringing it, right now since, we know that Lushu was the first, but it's not clear if, he just had the conversation, but then, he actually acted on his role later, or if he immediately went, and to do his thing.
Actually, it does say that...
Seems the case, because the others got the roles after he did his own, so that's what...
Well,
that's,
I think Cherthi actually says he receives his role... Oh wait, no, it was the master. He says, watch what happens. So we know Luju gets his role, and then he watches this whole thing unfurl, and then he goes, quote in quotes, goes off and does his thing, whatever that happens to be.
Yeah.
So we know Luju was first, all of the roles were distributed, all of the back cover movie happens, and then Luju goes on to do whatever he needs. So we do know that much.
Yeah, pretty much. And there is like another thing that I only noticed when I rewatched, the case of Ira for this recording that we are doing now. It is that all the foretellers, they create the unions after the master leaves.
Yeah, that's
which is something that, like, I assumed that the unions were something that existed before.
Yeah, no, it's not.
And but it's not, which is weird from a storytelling perspective, but I guess that's what we have to accept.
Well, no, the Cherthi actually tells us, like, it was part of the master's plan. Like, he gives out the roles, and then they start the unions. And it's interesting to note then in that case that while the unions were something they were planning for a long time, they weren't supposed to be enacted until after the Master of Master disappears.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very strange.
Yeah, which is strange because, like, in my head it worked like they had, their unions for quite some time. Like, everything was going fine until, the master came up and said, I am going to disappear. And they were, what the fuck? So, but that's not the case. So, it's just my fan fiction at this point.
Yeah, no problem. That's something you can expand on later.
I don't know if you want to touch this, upon it now or during, the mom's case. Yeah. But I we had, like, some notes about the fact that he's very dismissive of Ira. Like, Ira is probably the character that gets the less attention in his own case, because his case is used to set up the world in a sense. Like, he's the introduction to the story, because, the master tells actually how, there is one world and blah, blah, blah. That kind of, takes away time from actually him explaining to Ira what's going on. And with the other characters, we will see later on that he always shows some level of camaraderie with them, except with Ira, which is kind of mean.
That's true. But I mean, we get a lot from Ira's reaction in that scene, because I think it's very noteworthy that Ira is the first one to. And it may be just because Ira is supposed to be the first character that the audience, adheres to or connects with. But, like, he's there, for one, to help the audience place themselves in this world. Like, yes, this is fucked up. Yes, we should probably... You, the good person, the protagonist, would probably want to protect the world you live in. But this is the stakes on how this world works. We're not going the traditional route to save the world. The stakes of the world is something bad has to happen, and then we will address it afterwards. So it's very interesting in that context to also see that while all the other foretellers receive some form of, like, connection or camaraderie with their master, Ira also... He does get a little chit-chatty with the mom, but more importantly, he's willing to stand up and speak out for what he thinks is right, even though he knows his master is, this guy imparting all this knowledge and all this training to him. He's the one that stands up and says, no, we have to save the innocent people, the bystanders. So, I mean, that's... it might not seem like he has a lot of time, but I think there is really good character development just in the way they interact with each other. I mean,
and as we move on, to what actually Ira's reaction to what's going to happen next, basically, because there is, like, one event that kinda, sparks the whole problem, like the whole conflict that is in back cover, which kinda, stems from Ira saying to the others, guys, this thing is happening and I'm worried. So, the fact that it is Ira that starts the conflict amongst the foretellers is also telling, because he's the first that we see actually reacting to the situation, and everything else escalates from there. And I don't know, do you want to move, from that scene with the Master of Masters and him to the actual, meeting with all the other
I think
characters?
we can move on. It covered what we need to. So the next event that would happen is Ira holds a meeting with the other foretellers. Sometime after, it should be noted, the mom disappears. So at this point, they've created their unions. They've recruited Keyblade wielders, which include people like the player. And of note, all of the Keyblade wielders, in order to help alleviate some of the time that the foretellers have to spend directing their troops, which is more or less what it is, the Master of Masters have created a special spirit called a Chirithy, our narrator, which will help assist and move or guide the Key Kids around on their missions. But the Master of Master also, in the instance where he introduces the foretellers to this spirit, mentions a few caveats about the spirit.
Yeah, it basically says that these charities are there to assist and serve them, but at the same time they are kind of like an indicator. By looking at somebody's charity, you can tell if their heart is in the right place or not.
Yeah.
So the thing is that these charities are going to be helpful, but if the person that the charity is assigned to falls to darkness, actually what the master says is kind of funny, because he says if they are overcome by malice.
Yes.
which is really funny in Italian, and I'm not going to explain why.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll ask you about it later.
So basically, the charity will change color,
Yes.
and not just so it's not just going to be a visual change that will, allow you to see, that this person is tainted by darkness, but it's also like this charity is going to become dangerous because it can spread that darkness, which let me say may not be exactly that helpful.
Like if you made
it.
Yeah.
Like maybe we should have, maybe things that would have been better without the charities. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe hire somebody. Like, do you not get funding, Mom? Is that why you're making charities on the side? I don't. Yeah, probably.
Like that's really, really suspicious on the end. Of course, later on from the updates in Key and Union Cross, we actually find out that these charities can get really, really dangerous.
Oh,
so... Yeah.
Yeah. So back to Ira's actions in this whole thing. So he finds what they all know as a dark charity. It's a charity that's literally, it turns from like the gray striped pattern it has to like a dark charcoal gray striped pattern. So they know that whoever this charity belongs to has been corrupted by darkness, and that is the first indication that something's not quite right with the family. Yeah. So on his gut instinct, he brings up the possibility that because there is a dark charity, there might be a traitor, and because of how difficult it is to get to the state of being corrupted, which includes the use of a special item that collects dark energy. The reason why this charity has gone dark is because of that item that only he believes could have come from the foretellers, which is the 5 of them. So that would be Ira, Envy, Aced, Gula, or Ava, the 5 apprentices that the master entrusted with it may as well be ruling, running kinda. The union of the Key Kids. Thing. Yeah. So on his gut instinct, he immediately points out that one of them is the traitor, which I think is such... Like, Aced calls him out for it, because if there was a traitor, the traitor isn't going to say, yep, it was me, I did it. But Ira is just so earnest in what he perceives is the right way of doing things that he basically calls out the fact that there is a traitor, possibly, remember this is all on gut instinct, amongst them, and immediately everybody starts arguing about...
To freak out.
First they freak out because there's a dark charity, so that means one of their key kids has fallen to darkness. 2, they get pissed off because Ira starts pointing fingers. And then 3, like Aced, who cannot be part of a meeting without yelling, starts to ridicule Ira for the way he approaches the whole thing. And Ira is also just taken aback by how Aced has basically called him out for being stupid.
But you know what's funny about Aced is that he's actually always right.
Yeah.
In my opinion, Aced gets a lot of flack because it's very brash. Mm-hmm. But actually, he's probably the more reasonable of all of them.
He is he's more on the dime than anybody else is.
Yes.
But the way he addresses the situation is just as bad as Ira.
Yeah, but Envy 2 is more the one that actually probably has the more natural reaction, because she's you don't have any proofs.
Yeah, I mean, so, she reasons out.
That's reasonable, and she expresses it in a more calm manner.
Yes, in a very reasonable manner.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have also to take into account that literally Ira is accusing them without any proof. So to me, Aced's reaction is even more natural than Envy's, because he's true. What the hell, and there is also one other thing that I think is, I don't know how many people actually have considered this, but basically Ira is saying, there is a traitor and it's not me.
Yeah. Oh, you know
So
what? That's a good point. Yeah.
He's like, automatically, excluding himself from this. Actually, probably Ased should have tell him, maybe you are the traitor because you are accusing the others.
Not to get into Ased's, not to get into Ased right now, but like he's the second one to say, well, it's not me. Well, whoever the traitor is, it's not me. It's like,
but again, to me, like that would be everybody's reaction,
right.
Because basically, I mean, even those that don't say it, they're like,
right.
It's not me. I mean, of course. And I mean, to the point that like I don't remember who says that. I think it's Gula, maybe.
Which one?
He says, the fact that basically is going like, if we summon our charities, the one that looks dark is clearly the traitor. I think it's Gula that says no, because we can summon every charity from anyone in our unions, so you can't know which one belongs to whom.
Actually, Envy's the one that points that out, and it's interesting because she suggests that even though a specific charity usually comes when called, the way she says it also indicates that on a key kid's whim, they can also summon somebody else's charity, because the idea is, we could summon whatever charity we want, and it wouldn't be the dark one if we wanted it to be like a normal-looking one. And that's, I think, pretty interesting, because the charities are kind of not well explained, but the little snippets we get kind of... There are certain rules to go with it, but then also there are certain gaps in our knowledge of how they work that makes things really interesting. And in this case, summoning your own usual charity isn't going to help, because a real traitor could, in fact, summon someone else's charity in order to avert being discovered.
And there is also another thing that I just talked about, and is that basically, like, not even the owner of the charity can be sure if the charity that is in front of them is theirs, because that's what is implied, happened with what Ira was talking about, the bangle, that is, this magical artifact that collects darkness and blah blah blah. And that the foretellers really don't know where it came from, which is weird again.
Yeah.
But that item was handed to the player and to all the other key kids.
In other words, it wasn't something just anybody could have made.
Yeah, but their charity. But it is kind of implied that it was actually not their charity.
Yeah.
And I think that actually, is not implied. It's kind of, you can actually see like the actual charity coming into the scene. Yeah. I think it is. So yeah, it's really weird. But again, this is by design, because who designed the charities?
Right.
Like, there is a reason why they are.
Guy at the beginning.
Yeah, there is a reason why they are all, exactly. They look exactly the same, and they are interchangeable.
Yeah.
And yet they have this really deep connection with their kid, to the point that if one dies, the same thing happened to the charity.
Yep.
But at the same time, there is no way to telling them apart.
Yep.
So it's super sketchy.
Yeah. And like I said, the more you look into the way the master has set up things, the more it calls into question what exactly he had in mind for his poor little students and their students. Oh yeah, so while everyone is fighting about who it isn't or who it is that is the traitor, the fight basically ends with Ased storming out because he thinks Ira is not a good leader, to which really Ira doesn't have much to say against. So he storms out.
I mean, he's like...
Yeah. I think Ira felt really stupid right there, because I really do think Ira thought whoever the traitor was would come out and just admit their wrongs. Ira is perhaps maybe too trusting of human nature. I guess maybe I could say it that way.
It kind of goes, with what you were saying like the other day about the fact that Ira is too pure. Is the unicorn. Is this really pure, creature that at the same time is also really powerful and wild.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so this, the unicorn is a it looks almost like a weird choice for a character that is named Ira,
Wrath,
which is, of course, by the way, is Wrath, and
probably stemming from
of course
the word ire.
we haven't we haven't touched upon the names of the foretellers. I mean, we said their names, but not what they mean. But it is, if you are watching this, you know that they are based on the seven deadly sins.
Yeah.
And again, when you think about this, some of them, some of the animals make sense, but the unicorn, at least to me, when you see it, is not an animal that I immediately associate, with the rat.
Oh yeah.
Until you actually look into the legend. Mm-hmm. It's more like that in our popular culture, right now. When you think of a unicorn, I don't know. I think of My Little Pony.
Yeah.
So.
Or like Lisa Frank, hyper-colored fantasy with stars and rainbows. Like, it's a very girly symbol, but it's because pop culture has forgotten the roots of the character, which is, it is a wild, untamable creature that can only be calmed or captured by a maiden. And this is what we were talking about when we say the lore is interesting to look into, because now there's a lot of symbology, I think I could say, symbolism with each character. Another thing about Ira is that and this is going to be a well-known thing for most Kingdom Hearts fans, but in the cosmology, the way the world works of Kingdom Hearts, the Keyblade is a semi-sentient magical weapon that matches the heart of its wielder. So it has, when a Keyblade has a particular shape, it's very, how would you say it? It's very personal to the person wielding it. And in Ira's case, not only does he have the unicorn on the guard of his Keyblade, on the forte, which is the area right past the crossguard, there appears to be what I think is a lotus pattern, a flower pattern that represents, in the language of flowers in Japanese, the hanako kotoba, it represents purity of heart. So it matches his theme of being pure-hearted, perhaps to a fault.
Yeah, that's kind of, the dichotomy, in a sense, of Ira, is that, is this extremely pure-hearted guy that at the same time is very quick to judge, is very quick to act. He probably thinks, he's smarter than he actually is.
Oh no, yeah, possibly.
And so, Ira is actually one of the characters that, when I saw the movie for the first time, I wasn't really impressed by. It was probably the more forgettable for me. Yeah. But later on, I came around, and it was like, he actually, is probably one of the more interesting. And in my opinion, when it comes again to my experience, he suffers a little bit because he's used mostly for exposition.
Yeah, that's true.
In a way, compared to the others, but it's fine. I mean, it's a character that is growing on me.
Yeah, this whole movie has that effect, right? It just kind of grows on you if you look at it too closely.
And I mean, the both of us, we've seen this movie an insane amount of times, an embarrassing amount of times, I would say.
Yeah. Maybe it's not great to mention how many times I have it played on my on YouTube. I'm glad there is.
It's an unflattering. It's an unflattering.
It's worrying, I
reality.
would say. Yeah. But it's nice. So here we have our brave protagonists have just had their biggest fight without the teacher to rule them all in. Ased, the person who's supposed to back Ira, support him in his new role as the leader, storms out. And we're Gula, who is, I guess you would say, a know-it-all. He's younger. He's much younger than Ira, Ased, and Envy. He looks to be maybe about in his mid to late teens. He's a little nerdy know-it-all with a very dismissive, cold attitude. He also storms out, and Ava, the more sincere, youngest perhaps, maybe youngest, I'm not sure. She's about the same age as Gula, but one of the
Yeah,
younger
same
members
probably.
also leaves, kind of worried that all of her friends have just had this big fight, and we're left.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
she's the one that actually looks concerned about
yeah,
like the
yeah,
others are like, fuck it, I don't care.
yeah,
I mean, she's like, oh, I hope we can resolve this.
yeah.
It was sad. I don't like when my siblings fight. That's kind of
Poor girl.
the situation. But basically, everybody leaves, and
Except for Ira
only
and Envy.
yeah, exactly, except for Ira and Envy, and they have like this final conversation.
It actually, Ira has been holding back, and like probably justly so, because he got reamed for his his first instinct. But he has a suspicion that the Book of Prophecies that the mom gave them all in order to help guide them through this next phase of their leadership seems to be missing this entire situation. For a book that's supposed to be all-knowing and foreseeing of the future, this whole incident with the Dark Chirithi is not detailed in their book. And so he suspects, in addition to somebody being a traitor, whoever has this information must be the traitor, and also there has to be something, a section in their book, missing that the traitor has. But he hasn't said anything about this to anybody else except for Envy, who's the last person with him, trying to figure out why that meeting was just a giant
Went
failure.
that way.
Yeah. Apparently, Ira's not known for being so
Quick to
brash
judge.
and quick, to judge. She says as much anyway. But it's interesting because the master gave them this book, and Envy also knows, like, if the master knew that these events were going to happen, it's very possible that he's already foreseen this, but of course they have no way to tell because the master's been gone for a while at this point.
And there is also the fact that I don't remember exactly who brought this up, but basically I remember like someone saying that immediately, like at that moment, they should have suspected that the master set this up, because the fact is that the books were handed to them without the page.
Yeah.
So it's not like the page went missing after some time.
Well,
like the page was never there.
It was never there.
So
there was no sign at all that this was going to happen, but they were told these books are, they're the Book of Prophecy. It knows what's going to happen next, and yet this is not chronicled.
There is also the fact that like this page is not like it was torn from the book. Like they can't skim through the book and see where the page should have been.
Yeah, there's just
the
no
book
page.
is perfectly fine, except that this thing is not recorded.
Yeah.
And even when later on we actually see the page, is not in the book of the person that is supposed to have the page. It's just a page separate from the book.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah. We'll have to touch on that.
What I'm saying is that like all the books are equal, but one of them has like this random piece of paper on top of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, we are
that is for later.
That is for later.
As far and again, we're going all over the place, but this is Ira's case. We're looking at how is he doing? How is his role being carried out? And in the next scene, we see maybe not great because it opens with our friend, the loud man, the bear man, Ased, complaining basically to his younger comrades about the spectacular failure that just happened and how much he's been let down by Ira. And so
also, one thing that I just noticed, like the master said to Ira, your role is to keep the others calm.
Yeah.
Like he failed spectacularly at that.
Yeah. I mean, but how do you go up against a 7+ foot tall bear man when he's angry, right? How do you calm that down? Who in their life has ever heard, dude, chill out, and chilled out, right? Just let him go off on his own is probably what the thought was. So, what happens afterwards, and what we can what we can relate to Ira is because Ased has latched onto the idea that there is a traitor, he wants to form an alliance in order to suss out who this person may be. And so there is the second part of the story is all about the 4 other foretellers basically starting to toe the master's rules that he set in place, and they are going to form an alliance in order to basically just to ensure that, okay, I'm not the traitor, you're not the traitor, let's work together to figure out who the traitor is. And like Ira doesn't know anything about this because the last thing we see and what is inferred by Ased's shouting is that Ira is obsessed with reading this book of prophecies. The Master of Master in the very beginning of the scene also notes that Ira doesn't skim the book like maybe some of the other foretellers have. He is looking at it very thoroughly. Maybe
he's dissecting the book.
Yeah. Maybe he is paying too much attention to the book and not enough attention to his fellow teammates.
Yeah, so, he's doing what we are doing. Like, we are reading way too much into this.
Too much into it. But you know what? We also weren't told to lead a union. So I think the mob will forgive us. So these alliances are formed against the instructions of the master. Ira is unaware, but he doesn't have to worry too much because it seems like Envy is informing him of what is going on with the other 3 foretellers, which Ased has noticed already and is immediately incensed that Envy is not in on the deal to form an alliance. So what happens is an alliance is formed between Ased and Gula in order to counter the traitor's actions.
Yeah, it's basically, we have each other's back. And, we see what's going to happen. We're bros.
We'll check it out. If somebody gets jumped, I'll be there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ava declines because she wants to be a good girl and follow the master's orders, which is to mind your unions, mind your roles, and not to form alliances.
Yeah, because the problem is that technically, if 2 unions get together, there's going to be imbalance of power because, of course, their lux is going to be summed together instead of because this never happens in actual Union Cross because Vulpes has so many players.
Yeah.
But technically, what should be happening is that all unions should be around the same level of power. And that's, how it should balance can be being kept.
Yeah.
And so that's why, alliances are forbidden, because if 2 powers get together, of course, they're going, there's more people, so they have to get more lux, more power, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, they don't want to escalate the accumulation of lux. They're supposed to keep everything balanced. But because suddenly there is the idea that one of the 5 is a traitor, Gula and Ased make this alliance. And the idea is also to kind of prove Ira wrong, or maybe catch Ira in lying, not being the traitor.
Mm-hmm.
And he's called Envy in to weigh in on and perhaps join the alliance, but Envy immediately gets pissed off and reports to Ira. So, not only...
Envy's like, nope!
Yeah. But I think it's nice that even though Ased was in a way chastised at the meeting as well, he still brought Envy in, and the only reason why he didn't bring Ira into the conversation is because they just had a fight. How are you gonna turn around, especially if you're really prideful, which I think a lot of them are? How are you gonna turn around with a guy you just had a giant row with, and then say, okay, look, maybe we should team up? It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, because Ased's the contradiction, that's kinda, present in his actions is he says, I'm not the traitor.
Sure.
You are accusing, us, one of us to be the traitor. You have no proof that there is a traitor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I really believe that there is a traitor. Like, he actually agrees with IRA on that.
Yeah.
For some reason, because if you think about it, he really doesn't have, beside IRA's word, he really doesn't have a reason to actually believe that there is a traitor.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think maybe seeing the dark charity spooked them all because they were all
yeah,
very taken aback
that's
by it.
that's the thing. But at the same time, the others were like, and
It's not
like,
one of us.
Yeah, and Ascent is like, no, shit, there is a traitor. So I don't know, it's kind of funny when you think about that, because like he's the one that is I'm not the traitor, but maybe there is one.
Yeah. When you, like I said, when you look too far into it, like these characters are just, there's so many terrible and funny things that they do on their own.
And like we joke about this a lot, but they really act like lost children.
Oh my god, so much.
And they're like, we are all alone in this cruel and angry world.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started watching this, I kind of saw it kind of as like a very fantastical setting of The Office, where like all of the workers in this one corporation are like out to get each other because of incompetence or because of mixed wires and just mismatched personalities. But
makes absolute sense.
And the more you look into it, it's really like they're just really dumb kids with too much responsibility and like so much paranoia. It's really bad, but entertaining.
Definitely. And this is like a trope in, I would say, kind of, what can you say, like young adult / children's stories, that you have like characters that are very young and inexperienced, and they have like the weight of the world on their shoulders. Like it's very, very common. Like usually even like in stories, very classic ones in which there is like the chosen one and blah blah blah. Like the hero is usually a kid or a teenager that really doesn't know what to do in order to complete his or her quest. But since they are young, since they are pure, since they are blah blah blah, and they have usually but they also have something that the others don't have. Usually they are able to fulfill and complete the quest. So even like Sora in Kingdom Hearts 1 was kind of like that.
Right.
Here is kind of the same thing, but again, it's more structured. As with like Sora is just you have this magical key and you have to solve this thing because the cosmos decided that you have this role to fulfill. In this case, you actually have like a physical character that is going around telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And okay, what we have next on the list?
See, I think the last bit of Ira's character arc comes at a time after things have devolved a little bit more. Not evolved, nothing good happens.
No, definitely.
So Ira is stuck in his ivory tower, reading the Book of Prophecies, trying to suss out who the traitor is. But the alliance between Gula and Aced goes nowhere. And on top of that, Envy has taken it upon herself to try and dissolve that alliance. So a couple months later?
Yes, sometime later.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's said, but like sometime later, Gula tells Aced, look, this alliance is going nowhere, we haven't found anything, nothing suspicious has happened, and even Envy says this is a dumb idea, oops. Which point, and that we'll cover that a little bit later, but at this point, what's important is that Aced now has his ire not focused on trying to find the traitor or trying to recruit more people to his cause. His attention is now on Envy, the person he thought he could trust with this situation, has basically gone behind his back and thwarted his plans. And so the next thing that happens is he fights Envy. And again, we'll cover this later. He fights Envy because of what he thinks is right. And now Envy and Aced have actually drawn weapons against each other. And Gula and Ava have also been pulled in part because Aced is very strong. Envy is holding her own, but like we can tell that both of them are out of breath. And if Aced is the traitor because of how vehement he has gone, after everybody else, you can't allow him to win against Envy. So the two younger members of the team are now also fighting. While Ira is absent from any of this, which is not good leadership material. He seems almost like disconnected from what he should be doing as a leader, which is to bring all his guys back together. I think maybe he's relying too much on Envy to do his work. Maybe.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I don't remember exactly at which point, but Envy says, I can't report to you as often as I used to because the others are getting suspicious. So I would say that like probably is just I'm going to figure this out on my own by reading through the lines of the book. I will crack the code somehow, and while the others are literally fighting in the streets.
The collateral damage is pretty extensive, actually.
Yeah, the fact is that like even the player and like Scald and the other kids, they actually see this, and everybody's like, oh shit, they are fighting. And again, it's not a very good look for any of them. Let's be honest. And
but this giant yeah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. It's just their teachers. This character they should the kids should look up to. They are just these savages.
Fighting each other right in the streets.
The joke I said I'm here to beat up kids.
Yeah.
It's a really good joke, but it's actually what's going to happen later.
It's very sad for a leader / teacher / adult to do. But anyway, so there's a big fight, and now Ira decides to show himself, and not because he's heard about it. Well, actually, I think he does. No. Yeah.
It's just
he comes out mainly because Envy has reported to him. We don't see it, and there's a little bit of it in Union Cross. But basically, we can infer that Envy reports to Ira, lets him know that Aced has been fighting everybody. Aced has lost, and Ira finds him at this point limping through the back alleys of the town after, one, his fight with Envy, but two, also his fight with Gula. Gula was saved by Ava, and they ran off before Ira could find them. I guess in the nick of time, too, because there's a scene later with Ava, but that's neither here or there. The only reason we come to this scene here is because Ira finds Aced in the back alleys, and he has all of his suspicions confirmed. There is a traitor, there is a missing page, and he was basically ridiculed for nothing.
All along?
He was right all along. But I guess to his credit, like, when he meets up with Aced, and Aced basically says, finish me off quickly. He forgives Aced.
Aced assumes that Ira thinks he is the traitor, and so that he's going to kill him, basically. That's what's going on. But actually, Ira doesn't. Yeah. And this is actually, again, something that ties with the idea that Aced, he looks like, the big, angry, evil guy in a sense. But it is, like, stretched even in the character descriptions that, as you showed me, there is actual, like, journal entries for the foretellers, which I had no idea, but they exist.
Yeah.
And, like, it is said flat out that like Aced is pure-hearted. So
Yeah.
they immediately like say, okay, he may be a bit dumb, you know, but his heart is in the right place. And this is something that, again, we will come back to Aced and Envy later on in another episode of this thing that we are doing. But like the scene between Aced and Envy when they fight is one of the ones that really hooked me to the whole movie. Because I had like that perception that they both were being extremely honest in that moment. And it is kind of, you know, confirmed here where when Ira comes back, you know, to Aced, and Aced is like, yeah, finish me off, and Ira is like, no, like you still are one of the five lights, and I need you, you know, I need you alive and basically at my side if we want to fix this mess. So
Yeah, which, I mean, it sounds good on its face, but I find that scene between Ira and Aced kind of sketchy.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Well, it's because Ira was all about saving the world before the darkness or the war, you know, destroys everything or happens, however, because it's very vague, but they know something bad is going to happen. And Ira was the one who, right off the bat, wanted to avert it from happening. But here, he's kind of like it's very strange to me because he and Aced are both in the same mindset to prevent darkness from falling on the land. But here, you know, Ira tells him, "Look, it's not our place to stop things from happening. We have to be there for afterwards." Which I guess if your comrade in arms is expecting you to kill him, that's one of the first things you want to let him know is like, look, I know we've had some disagreements, but like our end goal is to be there afterwards. But it's still very strange that like he's fallen back on the mom's original plan as opposed to his plan, which is to stop darkness altogether. I guess in one way you could see it as, well, you know, he might be going his own direction, but he still has the greater goal in mind. Or, like, because I'm paranoid, I'm just wondering is he telling Aced what Aced wants to hear so that he can get this guy on his side? Because then right after that, after all of his suspicions are confirmed, and he's told where the missing section of the book is, he tells Aced not to mention this to anybody, which I find like, highly suspicious.
Yeah, he's like, shh, I'm going to fuck up Gula.
Yeah, I need to know what's on that page. Don't you worry about it. You go back.
Don't you worry, yeah.
Heal up, and I'm going to beat up kids in your stead.
Yeah, and this is also something that it was one of my biggest kind of gripes with the whole back cover movie as a whole, is that tonally speaking, like the foretellers are written very different from how they are depicted in the game.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because like back cover was written by Nomura directly, while the game, I think like it's possible that he's writing the dialogue 100%, but at the same time I get the impression that he more like gives them like an outline, and then there is like a team of writers that writes the characters. Because I know that they do that for the Disney worlds in the main games. So basically, you know, Nomura writes, let's say, Radiant Garden, he writes Twilight Town, you know, the places where the actual story is going on. And then when the Sora goes to the Land of Dragons, you know, where Mulan is, he's just, you know, just follow the movie and just add, you know, Xigbar at some point. Let him say like this and that. But I don't think he actually writes the dialogue for everything. That's what I'm saying. And so there is like this disconnect with the characters. Like Ava especially, like he's almost unrecognizable from back cover and the games.
Like compared to back cover, the characters in the mobile game have no personality.
Yeah,
If the
and
the characters in
it's
the mobile game are just flat. You can't tell anything from them.
and there is also the fact that, like, again, here Aced and Ira kinda, they made peace for
Yeah.
this for right now, but then during the Keyblade War they are the two that fight the most against each other. Like, they are at each other's throats again.
Yes. Yes.
And
And I do think that has something, like, I have a harebrained theory that I'll bring up during Ava's case, but I have like a suspicion where there might be an avenue to reconcile those two events, but like for now it doesn't. It's weird because there's obviously something either that they overlooked or they haven't revealed yet. Because later on the foretellers are back at each other's throats, and it's totally very off.
yeah, like there is that notorious scene between Lucio and Ava that really that we don't know exactly what Lucio says, but it kind of feels like she's not the only one that gets to hear those lines. Or, I mean, that the revelation, that sparks the Keyblade War somehow gets to the other guys too. In some way. We don't know how. It's like there is a missing scene, which is kind of, of a recurring thing right now, because of course Union Cross is not concluded, has not concluded yet. Not by and it's not going to end for a long time. I have like this impression. And so, like, there was probably maybe another meeting with all of them, like maybe in the square or something, in which maybe Ava tells them about what she found out, because when the bell is rung, they just congregate. After I think some time, it doesn't happen immediately, but after some time they just go to war.
Yeah, like everybody meets on the battlefield.
And it looks like they are at that point. They are just like following what's written in the book without any, without thinking about it. It's like the 3rd of November at 12 o'clock. We have to go. We have all to go, with our Union kids, and slaughter each other.
Although from the mobile game point of view, like the events leading up to the war, it does seem like there's a lot of tension between the unions anyway. Like,
oh yeah, that for sure.
The fact that the unions went out there without question seems logical because everybody is at each other's throat already. But for this space in back cover where Ira forgives Aced and ominously goes off to find Gula, like it almost seems like there shouldn't be a fight after that between at least Ira and Aced.
And Aced, yeah.
Yeah, they should be, if anything, like amicable with each other. But in the Keyblade War, like it's one of the star points of interest that Aced challenges you if you're in the right union, and then Ira comes in and more or less saves you by distracting him, and they both fly off to go fight somewhere else.
Pretty much.
So like it's almost like this scene doesn't happen, or something else has happened in order to put them back at odds with each other. It's very
there is like I don't know if it's bad writing or if we are missing something.
Like I said, I have a theory on what's going on, but because I am so hesitant to put anything out there because Nomura is crazy, fine, so anyway, but so
like,
at this
again,
point,
I am just expecting like some of these things never to get addressed anymore. Like they're just going to it's fine, that's how it is, because this has happened in Kingdom Hearts several times already. So there are like some situations that they are set up and then there has never been a follow-up to them, and so you're like, well, it's fine.
I'm going to have to be fine with it because Nomura is not going to address it ever again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, after 15 years, you're like, I guess. So
there's only so much one man can remember, really.
Yeah, which is fine, and which is also like, I think that he should like really hire like a team of writers
or somebody make an outline, for him to go back and like look over. But we're not in that. I'm sure somebody's doing something, right? They wouldn't lose. They wouldn't lose anything for years. Final Fantasy VIII, and not have the files to go back to.
Like
Anyway.
the source code of Union Cross has been lost, and that's why.
Yeah. So now we have to build it from the ground up. What happened before? Don't worry about it. We'll retcon
Don't
it.
worry about it.
No.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in the next
This
scene,
is my head canon, by the way.
Oi?
Now, like this is my head canon from
What you got?
now on that they lost the source code for Key, and so that's
Oh,
why
jeez.
they are recreated everything in Union Cross, including the
Woot.
Keyblade War event. It was like completely rebuilt from the ground up because they had lost
We're
the code.
literally living the lore.
Yeah.
If your headcanon is true.
Yeah.
The next scene is actually between Ava and Envy. They're confronting each other about their roles. Ava has been tasked, or has been collecting Keyblade kids for a secret special group that she's not telling anybody about. And this is rankling Envy, because now Ava is scolding Envy for telling Ira what's going on. She straight out tells Envy, look, there's only one way Ira could have known where Gula and I were. Because you were the only one that knows our secret hiding spot by the boxes. And so Envy at first confronts Ava. But they come to a realization that they're just both doing their roles. And there seems like throughout this whole movie, there's this weirdness about the roles because it doesn't sound like any of them has conveyed to each other what their roles are, except maybe Envy, because Aset knows immediately what her role is. So here, Envy and Ava more or less forgive each other for this disconnect because they just didn't know what each other's roles were. And
Yeah, because like for some time, during one of my first viewings of the movie, I was like, do they even know that the others have roles, or do they think that like they are the special one that has the role?
Right.
But after watching it a couple of times, you say no, okay, they all knew that they were handed the roles, but they don't know what the roles are. And at that point, the question is, why didn't they, just talk about that? Like,
that's another trope though in like adventure or even horror movies. Like a lot of things could be solved quickly if somebody would just talk to somebody else. Like, but I mean, as an older person, like I understand that sometimes you just don't talk about certain things because you kind of just don't have that that honesty with the other person to admit that things are fucked up and here's what's going on. Like you kind of just keep it to yourself until things like here come to a blow and you're yelling at each other because of misconceptions you've had with each other. So
the only problem that I have with that, is that it would work again if each of them didn't know that the others had roles too.
Yeah.
Like, because at that point, one of them could say, I have a role, I am special, I'm not telling the others that I have a role and I am special. Yeah. And since everybody would be thinking that, nobody would talk and it wouldn't make sense. Actually, but in this situation, in which they actually know, and after like 5 seconds, they should realize that their roles were like set up in a way that they go against each other.
Yeah. Like I was going to say, if any of them had said, okay, look, there might be a traitor amongst us, and here is what my role is, like they all could have just figured this out together instead of fracturing into different like subgroups.
But again, we wouldn't have a movie if
that's the whole point about fiction is to have a conflict, an interesting conflict, and this is a really interesting conflict. In part because either you get invested and start overanalyzing everything like we're doing now, or you look at it and you think, God, this is stupid. Why didn't they talk to each other? And you never come back to it.
I think honestly that was like the reaction that most people had to back cover. Mostly because, as far as I understand, there was a lot of expectations for the movie because people were waiting to actually see the Keyblade War.
Yeah.
Which you actually never see in the movie.
You hardly see it in the video game. The mobile game, I should say.
And I mean, it makes sense because, like, clearly back cover was done on a budget. Like, there is,
Yeah.
one fight, like the settings, the
One
rooms
cool-ass fight.
that the room that they use, like the same room with the
Yeah.
boxes, like is used like 10 times.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, this was done in the 2.8 engine that they had at the time. So it is not like a purely CGI, super fancy cutscene, fully rendered. It's just played in the engine. Maybe it's a bit more tweaked than a regular cutscene since, they were trying to present this as some sort of movie.
Mm-hmm.
But what it is actually is a big collection of cutscenes, basically.
But the lukewarm reaction to this movie is not because of how it was rendered, because it actually looks really good.
Yeah,
it holds up, I think. But the problem is, like, the story is anticlimactic. Like, this big thing happens, but you don't actually learn anything about the Keyblade War. You don't learn anything about the mobile game. It is a self-contained story about the foretellers and the foretellers only.
Yeah, you don't even know who's the traitor at the end.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
So...
Unless you're like us, and then you think too much about it, and then you're like, was there a traitor? Maybe there is a traitor, but he's not one of the 5. So it's kind of like... This movie is very strange, but also fun, I think, if you want to invest time in it. But
and
I'm
we
sorry,
have.
Yes, too much. In fact,
way too much time in this
we've
movie.
gone off track. We should be talking about IRA. The last thing we hear about IRA in this is that IRA is looking for the lost page. So he is looking for Gula because Gula has the lost page. And for whatever reason, even though they're planning for after, and even though IRA suspects or hopes that Gula was following his role, he needs to see what is on that page. And because of what Envy has told him, he then goes out and looks for Ava. Because he knows they're together, he knows they're hiding, and he wants that page. Ava herself confides in Envy that she didn't want to tell their leader, their big brother figure, where Gula was. Because Ira's eyes said everything. She was worried that if she gave up Gula, something terrible was going to happen. So, that is nearly the last thing we hear about our leader figure. He is actively out for one of his own teammates. And on top of that, because Gula is going on a mission, just a out-and-out mission to collect as much Lux as he can, IRA has also started ramping up Lux collection for his union. So has Aced, and Envy will also go along with this ramped up Lux collection in order to quote-unquote keep the balance. And she advises that Ava also does the same.
Yeah. Which is what is implied, this pressure that is put on the kids is what actually, makes them suspect one another.
Yeah.
So like the moments in which the player characters called and then Aced and the others came around and there are like the Keyblade kids, they're accusing each other of stealing Lux. That's kind of what's implied, it's the aftermath of them all getting super into Lux collecting.
Yeah.
Or
that makes sense.
Again, it's implied, it's not 100% spelled out.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, this ties back to the idea that there is still this nightmare charity going around, and there are the bangles being given out. So like the most logical thing that you can say, considering who made the charities, is that this is clearly was all clearly set up by the master. In order for everything to go exactly the way he
needs
would,
it to.
Needs to. And of course, again, we could touch upon one of the latest updates that we got, but I think we should probably save that for again Case of Pride.
And who knows? Between here and there, it might change.
Other
things to talk about.
we don't really know what's going to happen.
But that does conclude our case-by-case look at Ira and his character arc for the whole of back cover. Do you have anything to say before we conclude?
I don't know. I mean, again, there are so many other things that we could touch upon, but I think it's better to do in another episode in which we focus specifically on that thing. So, and this is probably already pretty long. So I think, So I think that we are good for now. And just going to say, I hope it wasn't that messy and that we were able, to say something interesting. I mean, I know it wasn't anything mind-blowing. Like, we are not here to resolve, like, Union Cross and tell everybody how it's going to end, because we have no idea.
No, this is just us taking the time to appreciate this magnificently crafted animation that nobody seems to care about except the people who got sucked into Union Cross eventually.
And even like all the religious, symbology and blah blah blah. I would just honestly just put all of that in Case of Pride, since I will come to that episode with my Paradise Lost copy and read from that and take like a sermon and something like that. I don't know.
I wonder how many people have played Kingdom Hearts Union Cross and also have read Paradise Lost.
Probably just me.
Jeez. There's got to be somebody out there. Anyway, that's been
it. We're good. We're done.
Chit Chat time, the Sinful Furry Gang case by case with Kou and the Box.
And the Box.
Wish you all a good day. Yup. I'm not too well known on the internet, but do you want to plug any of your spaces that you're known on?
No, it's fine. It's fine. We're good.
Yeah.
I mean, this is...
If you know us on the server, you know us on the server.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Like, I do other stuff, but I'm not really active anymore. I'm just, drawing stupid shit. So, I mean...
Stupid shit that I appreciate for you.
Thank you. Like, I used to have, like, a more active Bloodborne lore blog. But right now, like, in that case, like, the same approach that we took to kind of over-analyze back cover, we already did that for Bloodborne. So we squeezed every little, drop of juice that could have been squeezed out of that franchise.
Yep.
So there is no value in my blog anymore. That's what I'm saying.
Only the insanity that led to this.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, well, thank you for helping put together this project, because I couldn't be screaming into the void without you.
Same. It's good, to stay up till 3:48 a.m. in the morning and discuss, Union Cross and this beautiful movie that has consumed my life. It's fine. So, guys, thank you for listening, whoever is listening to this, and catch you up next time.